Sex and Sexual Energy MP3 as one of your most popular recordings. Can you tell us why you think that is?
It struck me many years after doing that recording, because I didn't at the time understand how popular it would be. But one thing I've always noticed as a speaker is there are two things that I would do on stage with some regularity that I started to notice would affect people. Number one, talk about sex, and number two, use swear words. I know some people don't like swear words, and I wasn't using them for effect. It's just occasionally the F word is the word that kind of conveys something. And in both reactions, I felt taboo. It's like, oh, we're not supposed to be talking about this, or we're not supposed to be saying that. So what I could feel was the kind of same release that a good stand-up comedian gives us all. They name something that we're not supposed to talk about, or that we don't talk about as a crowd, and we laugh about it to release. And I think there is a lot of release needed around sex and sexual energy, because it is something, from my understanding and from what my guides talk about, we have such a limited understanding of sex on our planet, and it has been quite distorted. If you look at how sex has played out for most of us, it's often seen as a power dynamic, and often people's physical, emotional, sexual reactions are based off of power, and you see that playing out a lot in the sex industry. However, you also see, even in that industry, places where sex is an act of pleasure and love and connection between two people. So I think that's what's changing, or that's the potential that can change on the planet, for us to see it more as a very different thing to how perhaps we were raised seeing it. And the problem is, I think it's just been taboo. So I think because it's taboo, people don't talk about it or feel uncomfortable talking about it. And actually, I've always found, not even in my work, just in personal conversations, people love talking about that. You know, if you're in a room with 3 or 4 friends and you start talking about sex, not necessarily in a humorous way or a titillating or a jokey way, but if you're just talking about it, usually everyone really turns on and really wants to hear about it. I certainly know I did. I really was fascinated by it, but fascinated by it, I was like, what is this? I'm fascinated by it, but this doesn't feel like the full picture. So I'm really struck by how many people want to understand and, I think, balance that energy for themselves, because we often see it portrayed in a very imbalanced way, and yet it's pure life force, and really it's creative energy. You know, we were all created through the act of sex, and so there is something to that. I mean, you could argue not everybody is created through the act of sex these days, but that's the original essence of how we all landed on the planet. So it's not anything we should be repelling or ashamed of. And I think the problem is, because of the taboo, it's become something else other than it needs to be for people. So I think we remember things that we're interested in, things that we have been taught to forget that something inside us remembers. And I think that's the key with sex. We all know it's part of life, but it's been separated off. So there's an intrigue.